We are 2 weeks away from the Boston Marathon, so it's the perfect time to talk about race strategy. Well, hello everyone, welcome to Running Otaku. I am the Running Otaku, and today we're going to be talking about Boston Marathon race pacing. You see, my dad ran 20 or so Boston Marathons from the mid-70s to the late 90s, but when he was alive, I was not a marathoner myself, so I never actually asked him how best to race the course. So if you're like me, you try and run your marathons at an even pace or perhaps at a slight negative split. And in fact, my Boston qualifier, my second half, was about 2.5 minutes faster than my first, and I felt great the whole way. The Boston Marathon, however, poses some unique challenges, and negative splitting or even running even pace I think is quite difficult to do. Since I've never actually run the course myself, I wanted to study data of runners that are similar to myself to see how they pace themselves from start to finish, and hopefully gain a little bit of insight that could help me and you as you plan out your race strategy for Boston. So with the help of my trusty iPad here, let's go ahead and take a look. So here is the course from mile 1 all the way through the finish, mile 26.2. What I wanted to do here is, since the Boston Marathon, they put timing mats every 5 kilometers and the halfway point, I wanted to split the course up into a few different segments and study each one specifically. So that's exactly what I did. So if we look at the first 10K, you notice it's actually quite downhill, especially that first mile or two. In fact, from the start to the 10K mark, it's a net drop of 300 feet or 91 meters. Then from the 10K to the 25K, it basically levels out. It looks like there's continuous rolling hills, but not a big elevation gain. In fact, it's basically even in terms of elevation gain from the 10K mark to the 25K mark. And then from 25K to 35K, that's where the Newton Hills kick in. So you can see here, it's basically a series of 4 hills. And in that 10K span, the course climbs 190 feet, which is 58 meters. And then finally the finish, so from 35K to 42.2K, it's downhill, 125 feet or 38 meters. So what I did was I wanted to take a look at runners of a similar age to myself, that's the 45 to 49-year-old category, who finished in my kind of target time of between 2 hours, 55 minutes to 3 hours. And if we look at the chart here, those runners, it turns out, those are age grade scores of 77.6 to 75.46. So if we look at other age groups, you can see what kind of runners these are equivalent to. So if you are between, let's see, 25 to 35 years old, that means that the equivalent would be about 2 hours 40 for the marathon to 2:45. And you can see here 50, 55, 60 years old. So not world-class runners, but good runners that probably have a lot of experience and would be kind of a good target group on which to focus to see how they pace themselves for this race. Okay, so here is the data. Now, I went to the Boston Marathon website, and they have the 5K splits for all the runners. So each dot here represents a male between 45 to 49 who ran between 2:55 to 3 hours. And there were roughly 40 or so in 2017 that met that profile. And so you can see here, for example, the first 5K split, all 40 were between a fast of 6:03 or so per mile, and the slowest for that split was probably about 6:57 or so. And you can see the data all the way through here. So what I wanted to do was kind of take an average of this and figure out what they were doing at each 5K split, which is what you see here. So this is pretty interesting. So the first 5K is very steep downhill, and you can see here their time averaged 6:35 per mile, or 4:06 per kilometer, and no surprise that was the fastest kind of average split for any 5K for the race. And then the next 5K to the 10K mark is still downhill, so the splits here are almost the same, just slightly slower. And you can see here 15K, 20K, 25K, etc. Now the Newton Hills kick in right about here between 30 to 35K, and you can see how the time slowed down significantly. So the average split for that 5K was 6:55, and then the end of the Newton Hill 7:03. And then what's really interesting here is the last, 7K or so is downhill, but the times are still pretty slow. So 7 minutes per mile or 4:21 a kilometer to 40K, and then the last 2.2K, only 7:01 and 4:22. So what's happening here is, even though that last 7K, the last 4 or so miles is downhill, the splits are pretty slow. So something's happening to the runners. One of two things: either they just got really tired on the Newton Hills and haven't fully recovered, or perhaps they took out the start a little bit too fast and they're suffering from some kind of fatigue, right? Their legs are burning and that is causing them to run slow. But at any rate, these are pretty, accomplished runners, and even they are having trouble in that last kind of 7K from the top of the hill to maintain their sub-3 marathon pace. I found that to be really interesting. Now, this slide, I actually went back to look at 2018. It was a really bad weather year with headwinds and rain and cold, a lot of hypothermia too, I believe. But it turned out that this profile looks almost exactly like the one on the slide before, maybe a little bit slower that last 2.2K or so. But it looks like, irrespective of the weather, the same thing holds up, where it's just really tough to maintain your target pace in that last 7K. So in terms of percentages, here's what I discovered. These accomplished runners, the first 10K, that downhill 10K, they were averaging, let's see if I can do this correctly. Yes, they were averaging 2.9% faster than their overall pace for the race. And then in that middle 15K, which is basically flat, they were still averaging about 1.5% faster than the overall average pace for the marathon. And then the Newton Hills, as you would expect, significantly slower, 2.8% slower than the average overall. And then that last 7K, again, it's downhill, but still, it's at the end of the race, and they ended up averaging 3.1% slower than their overall average pace on that last downhill 7K. Okay, so now what I did was I took all of those percentages for each of those 4 segments and applied it to my goal time, which here I say at 2:59. The reason I have it at 2:59 flat instead of 2:59:59 is I'm worried about, at the start, you have to wait around in the athlete's village for a while, and the bathrooms may be hard to get to. So I'm anticipating a bathroom break somewhere in the course, which will probably take 40 to 50 seconds. So to leave myself a little bit of buffer, my target pace, my target time is 2:59. So 2:59 turns out to be a 6:50 per mile pace, or in terms of kilometers, 4:15 per kilometer. And so when I apply those percentages, here's what I get. I should probably run that first downhill 10K at about 6:38 per mile pace, or 4:08 per kilometer. And then the next 15K, that flat part, slightly faster than my goal target, 6:44. And then up the hills, I'm not going to be able to hold my target pace, so I've got 7:01 here instead of 6:50. And then, even though it's downhill, that last 7.2K, I'm predicting a time based on everyone else of 7:03 per mile, or 4:23 per kilometer. So if I can hold all of these, I should finish at 2:59, plus the bathroom break will be 2:59 high, something like that. Okay, so finally what I wanted to do was create a cheat sheet so that I can write down some splits and actually probably cut and paste them on my arm here, so that as I'm running the race, I can make sure that I'm on target pace. And I created 2 tables here for me and for you if you also happen to be trying to go sub-3 at Boston. The table on the left is in terms of miles, and the table on the right is the metric system, so in terms of kilometers. The one number that I'm really interested to hit is the 16-mile mark here, 147.12. Why? Well, because the Newton Hills start at about 16.5 miles, and if I can hit this 16-mile mark right at this goal here, that means I should have enough time in the bank so that I can run a little bit slowly up the Newton Hills, and then again, maybe even slower in that final 7.2K, and still hit my sub-3 goal time. So if I follow this plan, I will actually run the first half marathon at 1:27:41, which would be a PR for me. I've actually never really raced a half marathon, at least not in the last several years. And my PR is only like 1:30, 1:31, something like that. So if I go according to plan, I'll run the first half at 1:27:41 and the second half about 3.5-4 minutes slower at 1:31:28. So if I follow all of this, I will be at just over 2:59. Plus you add the 40 or 50 seconds for the bathroom break, and I should just be able to crack 3. And so there you have it, a look at the numbers and my strategy for breaking 3 at Boston this year. Let me know what you guys think, especially if you've run the race before. Put some comments down below if you think my strategy is wise, or if you have some advice for me about pacing or anything else that has to do with the race. I'd love to hear from you. And that does it for another episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you saw, go ahead and hit the like button. If you really like what you saw, then please subscribe and click the little bell right next to the subscription button. That way you'll be instantly notified every time I upload a new video. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.